that down. So hopefully you will be able to see the YMCA slides in front of you. And I'm delighted to have found a system where I can see the slides and my notes at the same time. So that's really good. So to introduce myself, I'm Laura Hawksley. I work for YMCA Trinity Group, which covers Peterborough, Cambridgeshire and Suffolk. And I work for the Mental Health Services team as their mental health training, development coordinator. And our aim, our goal is to support the adults that are supporting the young people in our area, and in particular to support the staff. We run a range of training, aimed primarily at teachers at the moment, but we're looking to expand that and offer increased support for a range of different roles. And we also have a mental health services side where we offer direct support through a bank of counsellors into school, direct interventions to help the young people themselves. But the key aspects of us is that we do something that is sustainable and that actually benefits a lot of people in a kind of cascading model rather than just focusing on individual children. We want to work with the systems around them. So thank you for coming to this. The goal of today is to talk about strategies that you as staff members can use with young people who are experiencing anxiety. The way that it's going to work is that I will go through my slides, and then every now and again I will pause and check in with the question and answers, give you the opportunity to ask your own questions through the chat system otherwise, and we can have some discussion if that feels right and appropriate. If I don't get to answer all your questions before the end, I'll do my best to answer them afterwards and to get back to you. So fingers crossed I will. Okay, so I'm Laura Hawksley. That's me. And like I said, I just want to touch on a few bits of housekeeping. You know where the loos are, you know where the fire exits are. We don't need to worry about that anymore in these strange times. But they have been strange times, and I think I just want to draw attention to the fact that anxiety is something that lots and lots of people are experiencing. Some people for the first time, others it's heightened current and past levels of anxiety. And please look after yourselves as we go through the talk today. If you need to step out, please do. Please don't step out of the login bit, but just, take that time. And I guess, as with all webinars, I can't see you anyway, but do look after yourself and be aware that some of the topics might feel slightly triggering. So we're going to look at practical strategies that support young people that are anxious, worried or scared. And I wanted to widen out that definition a bit because I think worry and fear are sometimes words that are more comfy for people to engage with. And the strategies we're going to look at will be suitable for a range of children. And I do need to rely on you being the experts for the children that you work with and for you to make the decision as to which strategies are appropriate for neurotypical young people and which strategies aren't, and vice versa. The same around for neuroatypical children. There is no one size fits all when it comes to working with young people, as we all know. So again, ask questions as we go. Let me know, wave a hand, etc. if I'm going too fast or too slow. And let's get on with it. So I want to start off with, first of all, looking at what is anxiety. And if all goes well with the world, I'll be able to show you this link now. Hang on 1 minute.
You know that's scared?
Okay, 1 second. Best laid plans.
You know that scared or nervous feeling you get when you have to do something you're not sure you...
One moment, it looks like it's still only showing a section of the screen. I do apologize. Let me go back and take it off there. Hopefully now.
You can do? Or go somewhere you've never been before? That feeling is called anxiety. And it can feel a bit different for each person, but it usually doesn't feel very nice. Maybe your palms get sweaty, or your body tenses up, or maybe you get a tummy ache. Maybe you've heard of anxiety, or maybe you haven't, but you've definitely felt it before. Because everyone feels it sometimes. It's normal. You want to know something really weird about anxiety? It's actually trying to help you. It's true. All those uncomfortable feelings, those happen because your brain thinks you're in danger, and it wants to protect you. When our muscles tense up and we sweat, it gets us ready to do a lot of exercise, which is helpful if you need to jump out of the way of a runaway train or wrestle a wolverine. Sometimes our minds go blank and we feel like we can't move or talk. That would be great if we needed to hide. Instead, we just feel stuck. When your brain does this, it's called fight, flight, or freeze. The problem is, sometimes your brain gets confused and it can't tell the difference between a charging moose and, say, going to a new school. Both things can be scary and cause anxiety. But there aren't any dangerous wild animals at a new school. Hopefully. Understanding where anxiety comes from is the first step in learning to deal with it. So the next time you're in one of those tough situations and you start to feel those feelings, like butterflies in your stomach or sweaty palms, or it gets hard to talk or move, remember, there's nothing wrong with your body. You're just having normal feelings of anxiety, and they're actually trying to help, even if they're not very good at it sometimes.
Okay, I'm just going to sort out my screen share as well. I really like that clip. I think I popped it there, one, because it's a really lovely clip to use with young people and to explain it. And two, it just gives us all a shared reference point as we go through the webinar today. So that's the other helpful thing about it. And anxiety is a normal response. It is something that lots and lots of people have and experience, and evolutionary, it kept us safe. So it's important to give it credit where it's due. Now, okay, there we are. So as I said, it's a normal response, and it very much affects thinking, feeling, and physiology, our biology as well. So it's like a holistic impact. It's not something that just happens in one area of our body. It can affect anyone. And anxiety, like I said, it can keep us safe. It can be really useful. But when it is overwhelming, when it gets in the way of doing the everyday things in life, in the way of learning, in the way of relationships, then that's when it becomes a real problem and a real dilemma. And I think given the last year, there has been many situations that have added up and accumulate for young people in particular, but to be fair, also for adults, that can increase the opportunity for people to feel anxious. And actually, you know, some of these things include things like social interactions, anxiety around the playground now they're back at school, because we've chopped and changed. We've moved from relative isolation in lockdown to being back, for young people anyway, back in school or back in the workplace, and then back again. And the more changes there are, the harder it can be to keep up with it. Social media can definitely contribute to anxiety and to worry. And there are many different ways that this happens in. And none of these things are all good or all bad. I really want to stress that. But I think, you know, there's been lots of extra use of social media, particularly with older children, and some of that's connected people, but some of that's excluded people as well. I think that the experience of going back to the school environment, maybe having to get on a school bus, maybe being in rooms with lots of people, lots of children, feeling that you're being compared to other people much more than you were when you were at home on your own. Situation in regards to people's health, in regards to your loved ones, your grandparents, the fear of germs, your experience of people who've been ill, and your concerns for people who may struggle if they got COVID, all contribute to higher and heightened levels of anxiety around us. And the same we said for transitions as well. Just the process of a change is tricky for some children. And there have been many, many changes this year. So I'm going to go on and I'm going to look briefly about where anxiety comes from. And then we will start to look at the strategies that we can use as adults to help these young people. So I love the work of Stephen Porges, and this comes from the polyvagal theories that he's proposed. But kind of what it does, this picture, is just demonstrates the interaction between our environment, both our thinking and our body, and the external world, and how that's mediated by our nervous system. And that, you know, our nervous system is primed to keep us alive. So it's a biological system. And anxiety tends to happen in particular when we're in the yellow phases, where we're in the area that something, we feel that there's a threat, we feel that there's danger. And because of that, we'll experience a whole set of symptoms, for want of a better word. And I guess the goal for all of adults, and all the teachers, is to help the young people move into an experience of feeling safe and an experience of the nervous system, just feeling like they can use all their social skills. They can engage those top parts of their brain that help them feel okay in the world. I'm not going to dwell on that, but the references are at the back. So the window of tolerance is a lovely way of looking at how where the best place any of us is to be able to learn and experience, so to be able to be present in the moment and to be engaged. And that's this green section here in the middle. And either side of the window of tolerance, where our brains, all of our brains working, really, at every level, it's all balanced. We can either move into hyperarousal, which is where we'll have strong emotions like anxiety, anger, we feel threatened. And at that point, we find ourselves kind of retreating a bit into ourselves. The world's a scary place, and it's hard to connect with other people and to sometimes to access other people to help us relax and calm down. And then at the bottom level, we've got the zone of hyperarousal, and that's where there is a really significant threat to life. And actually, do you know what? It doesn't matter what our brain's doing, our body just goes, enough, and shuts down. So throughout the talk, we're going to be talking mostly about hyperarousal and helping young people come back down into that window of tolerance. But I think that's quite a nice pictorial way of visualizing where the young people are when they walk into your classroom. And actually, those young people who walk into the classroom, and they might be laughing, they might be talking to their mates, they might seem, you know, have a look round, but not be that bothered about what's around them. They'll be the young people in the window of tolerance. Their whole system is going to be balanced. Whereas other young people walk in and they will seem actively more nervous. They might take longer looking at where everything is. They might be more jumpy. They might feel less certain about what to do and where to do, less unable to commit themselves to being comfortable in the classroom. We'll talk about those more as we go through. So anxiety is a physiological response. And the wonderful thing about our body is that our physiology interacts with our mind and our mind interacts with our body. So we can intervene at both levels in many ways. And there are many physical symptoms of anxiety, from feeling sick to feeling like you can't speak, that you're dizzy, tense, your heart's racing. And some of them will be visible. You'll be able to see if a young person is sweating more or if they're shaking. But some of them won't be. Some of them will be expressed through things like a young person saying they've got tummy ache or they've got headaches, or pins and needles, and they don't feel right. So being aware and being able to notice some of these things can be quite useful when working with young people. And all of these physical reactions, they're all a result of our body moving into like a flight or fright situation where that sympathetic nervous system has kicked in. And this is what our body is doing to prepare itself to run, basically, as if we had a saber-toothed tiger behind us. Now, we live in a very psychological world as well nowadays, and there are psychological patterns that we see with anxiety, where people get stuck thinking about that they're going to be ill, that the racing of their heart means that they're going to have a heart attack, or that actually those physical experiences make them feel separate to their environment, separate to the world and the people that they love, or that actually, they just want to be away from everything. They're on edge, they're alert, and that everybody's looking at them, and everything's sort of super aware. And these we can see in the young people around us as well, from whether or not somebody looks relaxed, I guess. And also, I think, to be fair, whether or not we feel relaxed standing next to them. Because actually, if you're in the room with somebody who's nervous, you often pick that up from them. You might start to feel on edge yourself. So behaviorally, some of these experiences of the activated sympathetic nervous system are much, much easier to see. And the most common motivation behind all of them is to get out of the situation. You want to avoid the situation that's scary. And that could be from refusing to attend school, to finding it hard to leave home or to say goodbye to a parent. It might be feeling like a rabbit in headlights when a teacher asks you possibly something quite that they know the answer of, but the words disappear from the brain, mouth goes dry. They might not be able to answer, they might look down, fiddle with their hands. Sometimes it can be the consequences of some of the physical symptoms, so needing to go to the loo a lot, needing to drink lots of water because the mouth is dry. And then you can have panic attacks where actually the physical symptoms start to take over and people get very short of breath and look very, very scared. And I think as well, which you will probably see in classrooms too, but can be harder to relate or link to anxiety, are the defiant and the temper loss, tantrum side of behaviours. And these are behaviours which look like they are, I guess, based on anger more, but actually are a means, and possibly a tried and tested means that has always worked, to get out of a situation that they're worried about. So you might have a young man who's been asked to do, say, a maths test, and then he starts to act out, want a better expression. And actually he's acting out because he's anxious about failing, because he's anxious about being on the spot and not knowing what to do, not knowing how to handle it. So there's a whole range of behaviours that we can notice, which will help us work out how best to respond and what we can do to help people. And actually, it's also true that we can also possibly have a think about our own, because all of us will have certain situations where we feel worried and anxious, and certain strategies for avoiding them as well. It can take quite a lot of courage to take a deep breath and just face whatever it is we need to face in a day. Okay, so we're going to start to talk about ways that we can help. And I've split this into 4 categories. Really, they meet the 3 that we just talked about, the physiological, behavioural, and the psychological. And the first one that we're going to explore moving through is actually how we can use ourselves and how we are, what we say, how we do things to help a young person manage their anxiety. We're going to look at the physiological, biological strategies that we can use with young people, and then also about how we can help them build the skills and use their thinking to help them manage. And then we're also going to look at the learning environment. So some sort of wider environmental techniques that are outside both yourself and the young person that could have quite a significant impact for them over time. So that's my plan. I hope this content is meeting what you were expecting to hear about when you signed up for the webinar. So in ourselves, how can we work in ourselves and for ourselves? So I think one of the things that we're learning about, that we've always known about babies, is that the calmness of a mother helps calm, or a father helps calm a baby. And we're also seeing that reflected in the classroom. So I haven't got the stats to hand, but there are stats that have come out of recent research that has shown that a teacher who has got higher levels of occupational stress, that stress can be detected by measuring the physiology of the children in her class, measuring how relaxed and how able to learn they are, or him. And I think increasingly we're knowing, and we can see that a teacher who's got kind of a good level of well-being, that means they can function okay, their class is actually likely to get 8% more in their grades than a class who has a teacher who's struggling with well-being. And these statements aren't designed to make you feel bad if you're struggling, please no. They're really just a way of highlighting how important it is to look after ourselves as adults when we're around young people, because we are part of that interaction. So the first step towards this is our awareness, and our awareness of what's going on for us. So for example, I know that my heart is racing at the moment, and I'm aware that I'm feeling nervous delivering this, but I've been able to think about how that is affecting what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So, there are very key aspects. The tone of our voice is really important. We can actively lower and, if possible, deepen the tone of our voice. That itself helps calm both ourselves, but it's very calming for somebody else that's listening to it. The tendency when we're stressed is to get high-pitched and quicker, but actually that doesn't work. So really trying to take that step back and slow down what we're saying as well. So it's low and it's slow. Thinking about how we're breathing is really key. So before I came on, I'm breathing into my belly and I'm breathing out slowly. And I think it's the slowness of the out breath that's really important as well. So thinking about just deep but slow breaths out that just helps our body and our parasympathetic system come into the rest and relax. Our body language, often moving, is quite helpful, to be totally honest, because what happens is we get more tense and we end up crossing our hands. And these give signals to the other people around us. And if we can just roll our shoulders or move a little bit, that again, it tells our body that we don't have to be worried. We're not hiding from a tiger, if we were thinking about it in evolutionary terms. Being aware of our thinking patterns is key. So being aware of the thoughts that come into our mind, oh God, I don't want to deal with this today, or I don't have the energy for this, or here we go again, it always happens, or there will be loads of different thoughts that pop into our head. Why does it always happen when X or Y happens? And these thinking patterns in themselves turn into feelings, and they'll turn into our own frustrations or anxieties or fear, or they might move into they've kicked off again, what am I doing wrong? Why do they always do it in my class? And again, these interact in our relationships. So it can feel like quite a big ask, I guess, but I think the answer is we don't always have to completely feel these experiences, we can fake it till we make it. You know, the wonderful thing about our autonomic nervous system is that if we deliberately slow down our speech, lower our tone of voice, and breathe differently, we can show the world physically that we're way more relaxed than perhaps actually we feel inside our heads. So I think be aware that when you're feeling up to here and you know everything's building up, we can fake it till we make it around the young people that are anxious around us, and that we can help them help themselves and look after ourselves separately, I guess. Because it's tricky and it's hard work being around young people who are anxious, because if we don't watch ourselves, we can pick it up from them, and then we start feeling anxious and we start feeling worried. So once we've, thought about how we are in the interaction, how we're coming across in that situation, we've then got a little bit of a chance to breathe. We've got ourselves regulated, our parasympathetic and our sympathetic systems are in balance, and we can move on to being a bit of a feelings detective in the moment. And that's an opportunity to, I guess, be really curious about what's going on for a young person, to really think about what can I learn from that behaviour, and identify where they're at. And that will give us a clue about the best way that we can respond to them. And so we can check in with ourselves, we can breathe. And the amazing thing is that these things take seconds. It's quite incredible how quickly we're able to do that. And then once we've got some clues about where that young person is at, if that young person is hyper, then we can think about what strategies will help a hyper person calm it down. Or if that young person is really flat and withdrawn, how do we meet them so that we don't overwhelm them with our energy, but help bring them up a little bit? Okay, I'm just going to stop for one sec quickly and just check the questions. Oh, there we go, lovely, that's great. I can see now. So we've got ourselves, we've got our own body to co-regulate, and that's one thing that we at least do have an influence over all the time when we're around young people. So that's good. The following strategies kind of all fall into this really nice way of summarizing it. And this I've taken from Beacon House, and it's called the 3 R's. And I think the reason I put it here is because I like the image that it builds up for me, because it starts off with that regulation. So it starts off with the physical regulation of calming our nervous system down. And once our nervous system is calm, then we can try and have connections with people. And then when we've got the connections, we can then move up into the front and actually the most developed, most modern parts of our brain, which is the reason side of it. So the 3 R's, and they're nice to remember. It's no more reading, writing, and arithmetic as it was when I was young. Regulate, relax, and reason. Regulate, relate, and reason. So if we're focusing on that idea of regulating and relating, what we're doing with that is we're creating a feeling or an opportunity for a young person to feel safe in their environment. And that's really, really important. So we need to think about how we create safety. And first of all, if we're starting with helping somebody to regulate, there are lots of different ways that we can do it. But I put a few here. Some are more or less appropriate, depending on what settings you're in. I did mean to delete to go for a drive, actually, but sorry about that. But if we're talking about someone who is actively trying to avoid doing a task or coming into school, or it's quite an external behavior, then strategies like these are really useful. So first of all, you can name what it is that you're seeing going on. I think you're scared. Am I right? I'm wondering if what you're feeling is. And actually, sometimes you can distract them. You can give them a task. You can tell them what you want them to do. So you might be saying something like, you know, actually, do you know what? I need you. I can see you want to move about. Let's go and stamp. Let's go for a walk. Or let's breathe it out really loudly. If you can, bring some type of exercise or movement in, because these are all physical ways of actually helping the body just rebalance itself and reset the situation is. And actually, if if that young person is high energy, then trying to be slightly playful and supportive can, give them a chance to just get some of that physical cortisol and adrenaline that's inside them out. And it doesn't last as well. Feelings are wonderful because they do change over time, and nobody can stay hyper forever. It might feel like they can stay hyper for a very long time, but you can't. Eventually your body has to stop. It has to just let it out. So marching on the spot is a lovely one, as is counting out loud when you're breathing, because again, it takes the young person away from the thought that's in their head that's worrying them and brings them into the present moment. And with young people that are more internal and more passive, then we can take a little bit of a different approach to trying to help them manage their anxiety. And we can try and help build a sense of safety for them by being very present, being there, being calm, being regulated in ourselves. And again, by drawing on those techniques of talking gently, perhaps of times when you've seen them being able to manage, or times that you've been worried and that you've been able to manage. And we can pull on techniques like playing a calming music or humming or singing a familiar song that helps build for that young person the feeling that actually, the world's okay. This is all right. It's not too much. If you're working with someone that you've had a chance to build a relationship with over time, and you get to spend time with them when they're not anxious, then things like planned breathing techniques and visualizations can be really, really lovely, helping some young person visualize the safest, snuggest place so they can bring that feeling with them into the classroom, which they find scary, is really nice. Giving time is really important. And that can be hard in a school environment, but I think it is key that the body does need time to settle, as well as the mind. And being able to notice the small incremental steps is good for them, as is things like developing a plan so that when they do feel really anxious and they do shut down, they've got a roadmap for the one. I'm not sure that word's right to use now, but never mind. They've got a plan, they've got a path to follow about how they can come back and join back in with the school life when they're feeling able to. So I'm going to play a video clip next, and some of you might well have come across this lady now. She's called Pookie Knight-Smith, and she has fantastic resources for teachers that are absolutely excellent. So let me just try and get it open in my browser.
If you develop.
No, here we go. So this is on for a few minutes. Again, please do feel you can put more chat questions into the chat. Okay.
Develop a few stock phrases if you practice them regularly. So remember, in the shower, walking the dog, whatever, you practice saying your phrases in a low, slow, calm voice.
Just relax. Let me see if I can move that box. There we are. Lovely. Back to the beginning. So here we are.
Okay, so in today's bite-sized CPD, we're going to be thinking about how you can develop some stock phrases to help you communicate calmly at times when you don't feel very calm. So we're thinking about those times when a child's having a bit of a like anxious or angry meltdown and tempers are kind of rising, and you know that what you really need to do is to communicate calmly, but actually you feel like this. Okay, so what we know about calm communication, you can watch my other video on that should you wish to, is that essentially we want to talk low, so kind of quieter and lowering the kind of pitch, and slow. So I always like to think of those lovely audible narrations. So when you're listening to audiobooks and these people have those lovely velvety voices and they kind of almost like would lull you to sleep. So be thinking about communicating like that. And then we're going to think about developing some phrases that you can use, because if you develop some stock phrases, you can practice saying them. You can practice saying them when you're walking the dog or when you're in the shower or whatever, and you can practice saying them in your low, slow, calm voice, so that then when you're feeling like this, you're able just to roll with those phrases because you've practiced it, and you can tune everything else out, and you can be the adult that that child needs you to be, rather than the adult that you feel like inside. So sometimes we fake it till we make it, right? Okay, so the kinds of phrases that might work. This really can vary massively, and it's great if you develop your own, and we'll give you a couple of pause moments slightly later in the video for you to do that. But just to kind of get you on board with the sorts of thing I'm thinking about, the sorts of things that people have often told me works well for them are things around the fact that you're listening, and things around the fact that the child is safe. So we know that like anger and frustration likes to be heard, so a child needs to know, I'm listening. There's no need for you to kind of rant and rave and shout, I'm listening, I'm ready to listen. Or, you know, if they're anxious and really, really struggling and don't feel safe, they need to know, it's okay, you know, I've got this, you're safe. So phrases that people have shared with me in recent training that they have found to be effective for them: I care and I'm listening. So I care and I'm listening. I'm ready to listen when you're ready to talk. That for me sounds a little bit passive aggressive. I'm ready to listen when you're ready to talk. But actually, in the right circumstance, it's exactly what a child needs to hear. You know, once you're calm enough to communicate, I'm going to be here and listening. So I'm ready to listen when you're ready to talk. Next, you're safe. I've got you. A teaching assistant in a recent Twilight session I was teaching told me how her colleague always said this to a particular child, and that it always soothed this child, and she would just hold her and say, it's okay, you're safe, I've got you, you're safe, I've got you. And the colleague had no idea that she did it, she just did it on automatic pilot, and so that was a really lovely moment. So you're safe, I've got you. And then the simple, it's going to be okay. Sometimes that's what we all need to hear. So it's going to be okay. So our kind of suggestive phrases, you can pick them apart, maybe you hate them, but so I care and I'm listening. I'm ready to listen when you're ready to talk. You're safe, I've got you, and it's going to be okay. So I want to pause for a moment and give you a chance to have a think about the kind of phrases that you can imagine using that might work for the children and young people in your care. So what feels right to you? Okay, take a moment. What phrases might work for you? Okay, so once you've had a think about the kind of phrases that might work for you, then it can be really useful to share them back and maybe actually agree on a few that you might use as a team, because it can be really helpful sometimes for children to have that kind of predictability and consistency. And also, if you've got these kind of agreed phrases that you all feel comfortable using, whether that's kind of across the board or with a specific child, that can be really helpful. So maybe have a think if there are like 2 or 3 phrases that you might all share as a staff body, that you might all try to use. So have a think. Okay, and then the other thing is that as well as having kind of stock phrases for kind of use with everyone, it can be really helpful to identify if there are individual pupils who might need specific tailored input here. Now, you might want to think about what phrases work well for them, and what can work really well here is actually asking them. So at a time of calm, you can ask them, what kind of things help for you to hear when you're feeling kind of overwhelmed? What things help you? or what things have helped in the past. And if the child's not able to articulate that, then maybe kind of talking amongst colleagues and noticing what's worked well or less well in the past. So what I want you to do now is just to have a think about if there are any individual children that you want to do this for, and what is your plan with them. Do you have an idea about the phrases you might use already? Is there anything that's working well that you can share? Or do you think that there's a way that you can work with them to work out what those phrases might be? So identify the child or children and think about what your next steps are going to be to work out the phrases for that child. Okay, so hopefully that gives you some ideas, some food for thought. Remember that this will work best if you develop a few stock phrases, if you practice them regularly. So remember, in the shower, walking the dog, whatever, you practice saying your phrases in a low, slow, calm voice. Remember thinking about these lovely dulcet tones of our narrators of audiobooks and so on and so forth. Imagine that you are narrating something on Radio 4.
I love that. I think that is such a useful little clip, and she has lots and lots of really excellent resources on her website that are brilliant. So let's check the questions while I'm here. Lovely. And then go back to my screen share. But I think what's key there is that idea that there are things we can say to reassure the young people that are in our care. And that they might not necessarily feel comfy or natural to us, but that actually they're often very right for the young people that we're with. Bear with me. Get to there we are. Okay, so as she just said, I've written them down here, so they're in the slides when I send them out. And I kind of wanted to add on to that, because those stock phrases, they work for us because they can be very regulatory for us because they're predictable, we know them, we're familiar with them, and that works as well for the young people that we're with. Be aware that with the phrase, I'm here, I've got this, it needs to be a situation where you have got it, because sometimes actually it just needs to be, I'm here and we'll be okay, or I'm here and we can do this together. We can't control everything for them. And depending on the context that you're working in, if you're preschool or you're primary, then thinking about what else sensory-wise might help the young people in your care feeling safe. For example, allowing somebody to bring in a particular toy, soft toy, or a jumper or a blanket that smells of home, so that when they are worried, they've got something familiar to help bring that feeling of safety back. Think about, and if you can, liaise with parents as well about, what do the parents do at home that help the young people feel safe? And is that something that can be brought into school? And vice versa, so that you're sharing consistently across the two different environments. Perhaps there's a song that's very familiar or is very soothing. There's some music, I think there's Vivaldi's Four Seasons and some Mozart music that is particularly good at activating the vagus nerve and inducing a sense of calm. It activates our parasympathetic. So think about, whether there's music that could be useful. Or for some people, it will be a place. So a young person, it might be a corner of a room or a particular chair or a particular view that they can go to, and just helps them regulate themselves and helps them settle down a bit. So phrases that help create a sense of safety are really important and really useful in a school environment. And so are validation phrases. And these are phrases that we may or may not kind of have recognized as useful. But instead of dismissing a young person's experience accidentally by trying to be too reassuring, actually validating, I can see that this is really difficult for you. Or I'm thinking this is really hard for you. I'm really sorry that coming into school is so worrying. So actually really recognizing for that individual that, this is a real experience and it feels horrid. It can feel really horrible when you're feeling worried. I can see that you're really worried. Is there anything I can do to help? And sometimes you'll get the answer of, yes, let me go home. So if you think you're going to get that answer, you might want to say something along the lines of, I can see you're really worried. What can we do in the next 2 minutes that might help you feel less worried? Reassuring, it's not silly. You know what? Lots of people feel worried in lots of different situations. So this idea that validating the young person's emotion is really key because it helps keep their self-esteem intact. It helps boost their self-esteem. Sentences that are too much based on reassurance, like, don't worry, there's nothing to be afraid of, can very much be heard by a young person as, well, I'm odd, I'm silly because I'm afraid of it, or I'm weak because I'm afraid of it. And it can start a sort of negative spiral of thinking around it. So actually just recognizing that situation is for them. And to think about as well, whether there's a time or a place that you can have a discussion about it when they're not in that situation. So if there's a young person that's particularly anxious with a particular teacher, is there another teacher that can help them plan for that? Or is it a situation where you need to help that young person, give them space to talk? And maybe, especially if they're older, sometimes they actually don't need us to say anything. And perhaps we need to just understand that maybe we won't respond and we won't try and make it better, because often we can't. Often the situation is just what the situation is. So we might have to realize, why don't we walk around the sports pitch? I won't interrupt. Do you think I can manage it? And again, we're giving them space, we're validating their experiences and putting a tiny bit of humor in there as well, if it's appropriate. So we're creating safety through safety phases. We're validating the experience of the emotion. And another technique that can be really useful is to explain and explore the physiology of what's going on. So a set of physiological phrases. So sometimes it helps to bring that young person, especially if they're caught in anxious thoughts in their head, back into their body and explain to them that maybe, actually, do you know what, your body's responding like this because it thinks that there's something scary going on. And it might not be, there might not be anything scary. It's just your body is a bit confused at the moment. It will pass. Okay, let's just give it a couple of minutes and see whether you feel as sick, or whether your headache hurts as much. See if it changes. See if you feel slightly better. Sometimes I think with feelings of breathlessness and a panic, trying to help someone to understand, say, it's okay, your body can't do this forever. All right, it will change. I've seen you have this experience before, and I know you got through it then. And I know that you'll get through it today. So having that bit of confidence and trust in their physiological response can help them understand it. And if it's someone that you've got a relationship with, and perhaps you've talked about anxiety and its function in us humans, you can say something like, it's all right, your body thinks there's a saber-toothed tiger just over there, but I can't see one, can you? And that in itself can help put a different context around the behavior. And there's a couple of physiological techniques you can use that really can help young people activate their parasympathetic. And one is to just rub their hand down their chest repeatedly. That can help. Another technique, which is lovely, and it only takes a minute or two, but it takes a little while to build up its usefulness, is to look out of the corner of your eye. And you stay looking out the corner of your eye, until you involuntarily yawn or sigh or swallow. And then you do it on the other side. And as you practice that, it'll take you less time to yawn, sigh or swallow. And the understanding behind that, I think, is that actually your body knows that if you've got time and you can look out of the corner of your eyes and stay still, you're not in immediate danger. Okay, just checks out the danger and allows our parasympathetic to come back into balance. I think it's also important to, whilst we're talking about the sort of biology of anxiety, to think about how it does change throughout people's life cycles. And particularly when working in secondary schools, it's really useful to consider things like puberty, how hormones are changing somebody's body, their thinking, Menstrual cycle. I think sometimes people are wary of thinking about that with young people, but actually it can be really helpful. And also to think about screen time, whether or not there's been any activity. If you know that somebody's quite anxious before they come in and they've coped with the bus by sitting on their phone like this, maybe they've got a lot of nervous energy built up. And perhaps walking around the games pitch or stamping for a few minutes or whatever it is that you are able to do with them just gives them that break that they need in that cycle. So we need to think about the big picture as well. Fizzy drinks, how many cans of, it's not Red Bull anymore, is it? I think it's Monster now. Have they had on their way to school? All of these things. How many cups of coffee have you had before you walked into the classroom? All of these things change our physiology. Okay, so we've talked about some strategies that work with us and with the individuals. And I wanted to refer to some kind of whole school, whole class strategies now that I guess can be held in the back of the mind so that when planning is going on, you're planning before there's, you notice an anxious child. There are some things that are just helpful to have, spend time considering when for planning for transitions, planning for return to school, planning for the return to different classes. So one of them is about trying to be predictable for young people so that people know where they stand, so that if they're worried about coming to school, they know that if they go to X classroom, as far as possible, X person will be there and the class will look like that. So that can be really important. Try and predict and plan and support any significant changes that are going to happen. So with COVID, a lot of schools have had to move classrooms, they've had to split the school into different areas for different year groups. So being really clear with pupils about when a change is going to happen and walking them through it if possible can be really, really helpful. There's been a lot of changes, and incremental change builds up and can build anxiety. And if you know that your class is moving rooms next term and you've got 1 or 2 young people in there that struggle with change, then really putting that time into plan that transition can really pay dividends. Thinking about routines and structures for the class as well. And with older children, if you've got young people that are socially anxious, thinking about the structure around, group interactions can be really helpful. I think I've got playtime further down, but actually, free time, it might be that the queue for the dinner hall is particularly anxiety provoking for a young person, or the idea of being out on the sport pitch, perhaps without supervision, as close supervision, or without feeling like they've got somewhere to go or a reason to be, can be really anxiety provoking. So trying to think about the structures and the routines that are around for anxious young people to rely on is really, really useful. Where possible, offer individual accommodations. So, if there is someone you could buddy somebody up with, then if you can do it. All of these things have to fit within the context of the whole school and all of the pupils, as well as that individual. And I'm really aware that that's a balance and a juggling act all the time. Where you can, and especially with COVID, see if there's a safe place, a quiet corner where somebody can go to without feeling like they're too obvious or too in the spotlight when they do so, that they can just use to just check back in with themselves and calm down. And using techniques like subtle check-ins with people. So again, we're not putting people on the spot, we're just checking, repeating instructions or double checking that they understand and they know what they need to be doing. One of the things that came up the other day on a training, which I thought was brilliant actually, was the idea of clocks. Some schools don't have clocks anymore, or clocks don't have batteries in. And actually something like a clock can be really reassuring for a young person because it can show them how long they've got to go to get through a particular lesson. And so something like that can be quite simple, but it just allows somebody to plan their day, and plans can make anxious people feel very safe. They can plan when they need to leave the classroom or predict what's going to happen next. That can really help. So there are lots of sort of whole school planning strategies can be used, and there's a lot more in the literature on trauma-informed schools that can be really helpful as well. And I think a few of them are perhaps we're not necessarily so obvious. So one of the things that's not always very obvious is how busy the walls are, because for some young people, having too much stimulation and having it change too often can be quite unnerving. You know, so often an anxious person will have to come in and really scan the room to check that everything's in the right place and that everything's okay. And if it's all changed, that can feel very overwhelming and very difficult to manage. Okay. So, talked about some whole school strategies. Tricky to manage on occasion, but really useful. And again, these sort of build on that theme. So the first one is ways to try and build some movement into the day. And I don't know whether this is easier or harder for which age group, really. I guess I'm kind of thinking that maybe it's harder to get a group of teenagers to stand up and stretch, but I could be wrong. I don't want to make any stereotypical judgments there. But actually, movement really does help produce feel-good hormones and feel-good chemicals. It also helps promote good sleep, and it just helps relax the mind as well. So anything that you can do to incorporate movement into a school day, and it doesn't have to be a whole hour or even 5 minutes, literally just a stretch, a roll of the shoulders, raising your arms out. If you've got younger children, you can do songs, star jumps, a whole range of, pushing a ball against a wall, a whole range of different exercises. But it just loosens up, and they're things that can be built into everyday day stuff that just helps reduce anxiety, kind of cuts it off before the past to a degree, and particularly if they can be predictable. Another relatively simple thing I think that you can bring into a class is the concept and acts of kindness. And what the research has shown us is that the brain can't be anxious if it's been kind or if it's been grateful. So having a little bit of time in class every day to think about being grateful, being thankful, having a diary or a board that you can mark that up on, or a way of modeling it as well, is another technique that you can just introduce very simply that just helps reset a brain before a lesson starts. So breathing exercises are another really nice way that don't necessarily take that long, but they can just reset. So when we breathe, when we're anxious, what happens is we can't start to breathe in the top. We tend to breathe in more and not breathe out fully. So we end up with actually, interestingly, too much oxygen. And so any breathing exercise that encourages us to breathe out as if we're breathing out through a straw can be really helpful. It elongates the out breath, and that actually serves to balance better the carbon dioxide and oxygen in our bodies. So it's 4:30. I think I might put this video on at the end if that's okay, because I don't want to overrun. And then the last bit on this slide, I think they have a mixed review, fidget toys, but actually they can be really useful for young people that are really worried, because I don't know if you've ever noticed for yourself, but certainly one of the things about anxiety is that people often fiddle. They twiddle with their hair, or they fiddle with their fingers, or they twiddle with their sleeves. And the reason that they do that is that's a form of self-soothing. So actually, when we tell a child not to chew our jumper, we're actually taking away a self-regulation method, potentially. So something like a fidget toy, It doesn't have to be those fidget spinners, but it could be, you know, a tube. Well, marbles might be a bit distracting, but there's a whole range of squidgy ones and soft toys, and they can help make them. There's quite a lot of references on Google that, you know, can really help occupy the part of the brain that might otherwise be scanning the room for danger. So they're excellent. And for older kids, you know, something in there, allowing them to have something in their blazer pocket or their trouser pocket can be really useful. Let's see. So there we go. I will show this clip because again, it's a really nice, very simple breathing exercise. Let me just stop the share while I sort this out.
Mindful.
Okay.
Breathing.
You might want to try this yourself.
Close your eyes and rest your hands on your knees. Bring your attention to the touch of your body on your seat. Feel the weight of your body on your chair or cushion. Make sure that your back is straight and that you're comfortable. Take a few deep breaths. While you're breathing deeply, relax your shoulders, your stomach muscles, the muscles in your face, your hands, and your legs. Let go of all the tightness in your body. Now bring your attention back to your breath. Notice what it feels like as it enters through your nose, goes down through your throat, filling your lungs, and back out through your nose. Notice your stomach and chest rise and fall each time you breathe in and each time you breathe out. And just allow your breathing to be natural and relaxed. Now bring your attention to the feeling of your breath in your nose. Feel your breath as it comes in and goes out. Just focus on this sensation, paying attention to each time you breathe in and each time you breathe out. As you inhale, maybe your breath feels cool. And as you exhale, maybe it feels a little warmer. When your mind wanders, or if you become distracted, just notice what's going on in your head, and then gently bring your attention back to your breath, going in and out. Focus on the feeling of your breath and allow thoughts and feelings to come and go in the background. Now gently bring your attention back to the touch of your body on your seat and open your eyes.
I like that one because it's not too long. And there is another one, I think the link is in the slides as well, that it literally only takes 1.5 minutes. And it's a very, very good way of teaching people how to recognize a change in their body resulting from changing how they breathe. And I think I particularly like that because it gets rid of the myth that you have to think of nothing, because you can actually think of anything. I can't get through any sort of meditation without 101 different thoughts coming in my head. But learning to just let them go and concentrate on something separate is a really useful skill. And it's particularly useful with anxiety. Okay. So let's go back. Okay, hang on. Try again. So that's one example of mindfulness and awareness. And that's the sort of more traditional idea of focusing on our breathing. But there are other ways that we can utilize awareness in a less formal, in a way, structure. And one of the things that I think is a lovely technique to use for ourselves and for a class as a whole, or for an individual, is the 5-4-3-2-1 method. And actually, Pookie Knightsmith has this again on her website of links. That's just one reference for it. There's quite a lot around for it. And you can do them in any order with your senses. So if you wanted to, you can do 5 things that you can touch. So I've got my desk. I've got the soft toy that I use to remind myself to record webinars. I've got my computer mouse, my computer on my face. 4 things that I can see. I've got a trampoline in the garden, I've got a window, I've got a light, I've got books. There's always often many more things you can see. 3 things that I can hear. And actually there's not, I can hear the charger on the computer, I can hear myself talking. And I think I can hear the whir of the fridge, given that I'm working at home. But one thing I can't hear, which is quite reassuring, is my daughter. So that's a change. Think about 2 things you can smell. And this can be a harder one to do depending on where you are. Because I think if you're somewhere where it's not going to smell very nice, you might want to think about maybe repeating the idea of touch or see or hear. And then finally focusing on one deep breath in and a slowly breath out, a slow breath out. And again, that idea of imagining you're breathing out through a straw is really useful because it stops us from going, which actually creates a bit of anxiety in ourselves anyway. But using that with a class or a young person, and then just checking in with them, how are they feeling? Are they feeling the same as they did when they started? Or are they feeling different? And if they're feeling, a little bit better, a little bit more relaxed, do they want to do it again? And that idea of repeating something can really help reduce anxiety. So it could be something like 5-4-3-2-1, or it could be something like square breathing, where you breathe in for 4, out for 4, in for 4, out for 4. So these are, when we can remember to do them, things that actually become predictable and create a sense of safety just in themselves, but because they can become habitual. Another one which is lovely is the idea of breathing in and then out as you go round your hand. And that combines both the sense of touch with the sense of concentrating on your breathing. So that can be lovely for somebody that's quite busy and that needs something to do while they allow their body to settle. The final clip on this page is the 1-minute pause. And this I really, really like because it is so short. It would be really easy to teach and to bring it into a working school day. And actually, it can be, if you're somebody who's working on a one-to-one or in a small group, and you find yourself getting wound up, irritated, annoyed, frustrated with the young person you're with, or you can see that they are, you can use yourself as a way of breaking a pattern. So, do you know what? I think I need to, hang on, I just need to stop for a minute. hold on, just bear with me. And then just talk your way through a minute of breathing. And that young person might be looking at you as if you're completely mad, or they might join you. And either way, the chances are it's just distracted a tiny bit the anxiety that was building and allowing for something different to happen next. Okay, so these are tips that I'm sure you're aware of as teachers and as teaching staff, and it's always worth going over them again, because repetition helps us learn, as we know. But the idea of trying to keep an open mind, to be empathize and to validate, doesn't mean we need to agree or collude. To be non-judgmental and accepting. And I think as well, what I would really ask you to do is to remember very clearly that what is the function of this behavior? Behavior is communication. What is the function of that person looking the way that they look? What can we learn and what can we tell with that? And also that anxiety, it is a behavior and it's not the person. It doesn't define the child. And helping a child learn that they are an individual that experiences worry or fear is actually really, really empowering, because it allows them to be an individual without it. So I think thinking about our language around children that experience anxiety is really important, because actually, if a child hears you describe them as an anxious child, they start to label themselves as an anxious child. And that makes it harder for them to even begin to imagine the possibility that they'll be able to change and that they'll be able to be something different. And I think as well, holding in our minds that actually behaviours do change over time is really interesting and really challenging, I think, because I think we sometimes get into the trap of thinking that what we see in front of us in a young person is always going to be there. And that because of that, it can create a bigger sense of worry in us, because it creates a sense of we need to help them now, because if we don't help them now, it will always be there. And actually that urgency might not be necessary. There will be times when you feel that actually the anxiety in this person's life is overwhelming, and actually they need professional help. They need to be referred either to the support services you have in school, or actually beyond that through the GP to the CAMH services that are local. And those young people will need maybe longer term support to help them move on from their anxiety. They might need medication. But most of all, they need confidence from the staff around them that this is something that can change. This is something that doesn't have to be there always. It is a journey. Getting a bit philosophical, sorry. And I guess the other side for anxiety as well is to just be aware in our mind whether or not it creates a safeguarding issue. And that we just have to hold that in the back of our head. What strategies are young people using to avoid the situations they're worried and scared of? So we just have to just hold that and be curious with that. And I think with that, we can be open and honest in our discussions with young people as well. So this is an acronym, I can't say it, acronym that I will leave for you to read on the slides. I think I'm going to pull the webinar to a close and ask you to put any questions you might have into the chat, or I will have a look and see if I can unmute you and give you the opportunity to ask me any questions or raise any points you'd like more clarification on. But it's lovely. It covers pretty much, it summarises the other things that we've talked about today. There we go. That's touching on situations where actually extra further help is required. And there are lots of really useful online resources. The Anna Freud Centre has some brilliant stuff, particularly for older teenagers and for teenagers. Same with Young Minds. Pookie Knight-Smith, I've referred to already today, has some great resources and really focuses as well on offering support to teachers. And so does the Anna Freud Centre, to be fair. So they're really worth looking up and exploring when you get a chance. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. As most of these things do, there is a Survey Monkey that I would really appreciate it, an evaluation if you could complete it for me. Let me see if I can. I might have to stop share to be able to see that. Hold on. And I popped that in the chat, and I think it comes up at the end of the Zoom, but because I've not entered the Zoom call before, I don't know. But I would really, really appreciate your feedback in that, and any ideas for future talks would be great. The YMCA offers a range of training for school staff and other staff, from managing challenging behaviour to attachment to classroom strategies. We can also offer write and develop bespoke training for staff teams, and also assemblies for young people. So please do feel that you can get in touch with us and drop me an email. I'm Laura Hawksley. In fact, I'm really clever. I will put it in the chat. Because we're really happy to continue the discussion as well. So that's me. Thank you for your comments. I really appreciate that. The slides will be sent out. And yeah, I'll send out the recording to you as well. I hope you have a lovely evening and get a chance to enjoy some of the sunshine that we've had today. Actually, like that little bit of residual heat and that's still out there. And have a good evening. Thank you very much. I will stay around for a little while in case anyone would like to. Let's see. Anyone would like to talk, do raise your hand and I'll see if I can unmute you, but it seems I won't unmute everybody all in one go. Thank you. Brilliant. I'm glad it's been useful. That's the point of it. Thank you.